right, so welcome Eve and Damian. Two very big movers and shakers in the coaching supervision world. Both have written numerous books, both work on the global scene, both are educators, and both are brilliantly lovely, wonderful people. That's all I'm going to say. You can read their bios, so I'm going to hand it over to the two of you.
Okay, well, I'm going to start. Actually, do you know what? I happen to have this picture up, so I'm just going to show you this picture. You weren't expecting that, because I was doing another presentation today, and we were talking about climate change and, you know, what is it that makes us passionate about the things we're passionate about. And this is what makes me passionate. My son, his new wife, and working as doctors, and hoping that those pristine views, which are in Australia, Tasmania in the yellow, will stay the same. So that's something about me. I'm passionate about climate change and the work we can do there. But other things, well, I run something called the Global Supervisors Network, which started, oh gosh, I had the idea in about 2013, and finally the very first meetings were held at the start of 2016, and we've been holding 2 meetings a month ever since. It's only for qualified supervisors, and there are about nearly 300 around the globe, and we meet twice a month on Thursday nights and Friday mornings, because they're the same session done twice to cover time zones, so they're live. And there are a few people on this call who are members and who've done sessions like Michelle, who you can all see in Paris. And we're also at the moment doing Monday calls in the morning and the evening to cover time zones, which are sort of support sessions through coronavirus. So as I say, that's been running now for over 4.5 years. And the other thing you probably wouldn't know about me is that I'm chair of one of the professional bodies, but it's not a big one like the ICF. It's a smaller one called the Association for Professional Executive Coaching and Supervision. And it basically, members tend to be at master's level plus. So they only have one level of accreditation, which is roughly like MCC. And I've been chair of that since January. And then I run something called the Climate Coaching Alliance with 2 other people who co-founded it with me. And we do crazy things like 24-hour conversations around the world, where we start at midnight and we end at midnight. And hour by hour, we move across the time zones in the world. And we're doing our next one on October the 1st. So I'm going to share my screen now and talk about what we're really meant to be talking about, rather than
Eve, one more thing I want people to know about you is that you wrote several books, but the last one, Systemic Coaching, is a great book, and I highly recommend everybody to read it. And unfortunately, I didn't have the book before when I started training supervisors, Eve, because now I want to start using it because I do believe it's such a great resource. So I highly recommend the book to everybody.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
she wrote the book with Peter Hawkins. It's called Systemic Coaching, and it came out, how long ago? It came out a few months? How many months?
It came out in the middle of December, so it's relatively new. And there's one other book which I've written, which Damian and Lily contributed to one of the chapters. And that book comes from the heart, which is why it's called The Heart of Coaching Supervision. It's really about how we look after ourselves in order to look after our clients. So I'm genuinely going to share my screen now if I can remember how to. I'm having a Lily moment. Sorry, Lily.
Share screen, press the button there.
So of course what we're doing is we're talking today about exactly what we're doing, which is virtual work. It's based on a chapter that Damian and I have been asked to contribute to a book called Coaching and Mentoring Supervision, and it will be the 2nd edition, and the authors are Tatiana Bachkarova, who works at Oxford Brookes University, Peter Jackson, who does the same, and then Professor David Clutterbuck, who is a professor at various universities, but a visiting professor at Oxford Brookes University as well. So we've obviously done our own literature research, and we've done our own original research. And I'm going to just highlight a few things from the literature, and then Damian is going to highlight a few things from the research we did with coaches and supervisors. And then we're going to ask you to be part of the live research by working in breakout rooms yourself. So that's the plan. Did you want to say something about yourself, Damian? Because you haven't really introduced yourself.
Yeah, I think most people know me here with Lily. I co-facilitate this network, and our vision for this network is to get people similar to Eve, what you are doing globally, We started in the Americas, but now we open it to everybody who want to participate. And our goal is to bring visibility to coaching supervision worldwide. And we have conferences once a year. And I also train coaches, mentor coaches and supervisors for a few years. And also something else, we started Asian also Supervisors Network. And we are starting also Spanish-speaking Supervisors Network. So we're trying to bring visibility to coaching supervision worldwide. And my personal vision is that every coach in the world has a supervisor.
And why not? Because start big. Start as you mean to go on. So, just to talk a little bit about then, what is virtual work? Well, I suppose we all know that. It's work that's done when we're not in the same place. And so we're supported by technology. And that helps people to be connected. But one of the things I found out as I was doing some research, and for those of you who know me, this is actually one of my supervision groups, and of course they give me permission to use it. We tend to have quite a lot of laughs when we're doing supervision, but the reason I was using this is because, in fact, even before lockdown, it had got to the point where virtual sessions had tipped over, and there were more virtual sessions than there were face-to-face meetings. And you'll know about the Sherpa coaching survey because it's been done every year for many years. And taking, say, 5 years ago, it's obviously increased further. So the deal was it was already increasing before coronavirus, and then obviously it's increased even further. But it brings up lots of issues, doesn't it? How do we supervise virtually in a way that's safe and robust and reliable? And what are our strategies and challenges? And we've all had a lot of opportunity to experience the challenges and the opportunities it brings. So here are just a few that have been brought out. So when people talk about virtual supervision, there are some things that come out quite strongly. Obviously, partly that it's cost effective, and it allows more and more people to have access to it. And that's become very clear, not just through lockdown, but through parts of the world where there are literally no trained supervisors. I mean, courses like Damian's are making a difference to that now, but there are large parts of the world where the only way to access a supervisor anyway would be virtual. But I think the second quote is really important, and this really struck me. The one thing I've learned, particularly through lockdown, is to assume that something will go wrong and be prepared for it, and not worry that people will drop out, people have to drop back in, that things won't go according to plan. I'll lose, I mean, you know, I've dropped out of my own webinars and, you know, and had to come back again. Is just to remember that it's about the people and not to be hung up on the technology. And so in the research and the literature, there are things that people are guided to do, like having a second host, so that you're not having to worry about the technology, you're not having to worry about the security, you're not having to go keep admitting people from the waiting room. So just remember that to do everything you can so that you can be worrying about what you're saying, the people that are involved on the call, rather than worrying about the technical elements of it. I'm going to ask you in a minute, I'm going to go back to a full screen. So you've got a choice of 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. In a minute, I'm going to ask you to hold up either one finger, 2 for your choice, 3, 4, or 5. So how much do you think Zoom traffic increased worldwide between February and March this year? So can you just remember whether you're going to choose 1, 2, 3, or 5? Because I've got to go back to full screen so we can all see. Okay. Okay, hang on. Oh, Damian, I suppose you shouldn't do it, Damian. Okay. You know the answer. Oh, I think Natalia and Naomi are cheating because I can't see their pictures. And Lily's cheating because I can't see Liz's picture. But thank you. Okay. Well, I have to say most of you got it right. It was 535%. And you can see why their shares grew so much. I mean, the clever thing to do if you really want to make money that way would have been to get some shares as soon as we knew there was a problem. But there you go. Hindsight's a great thing, isn't it? So I'm just going to go back to my screen again. So, what about the existing literature? Well, there are a number of things that emerge. And one of them, for example, is that in different countries, things can be considered correct. So there are some obvious examples like eye contact. So if in some cultures to constantly be looking at a screen would seem to be impolite, that's one example. Case studies or examples of behavior can be very different. So an example is given in Pullen's book where in different cultures, somebody has been stopped by the police for their driving, and would you or wouldn't you say that they were driving over the speed limit? And depending on the country, the response was completely different, because in some countries it would be considered rude not to support your friend, and in other countries people would simply say the truth. So it's just interesting, the cultural element to this. And of course there are other elements around, when do you hold meetings? Do you hold them on a Friday? In some countries, in some cultures, Friday is a weekend. And then there's another piece of research that's been done with Downey, saying that it's one of the things that people found very helpful was be able to see facial and body expressions. So there's something, sorry, I'm slumping a bit, but there's something about trying to sit back in your seat, making yourself as tall as you can in the picture, so people can see more of your body and actually see some of your hand gestures, because it helps people to make out what's going on beyond just the voice and this bit, which it can be when people sink down and they haven't quite got their seat right and the camera right. And of course another thing is about the capacity for profound listening. But another element that Edna Murdoch in the last quote talks about is this ability, because you can go around the world, to find a supervisor that works for you, regardless of where you are in the world, you can get a really good match. And then other things that came out, that in other research, that even where there weren't visual clues, it was felt that this could be compensated by really paying attention to what people were saying, and also by the quality of the questioning that was being used. But a question's been brought up, which will come up with what Damon reports about. For some people, rapport is more difficult to build and can be more difficult for sensitive issues. And that might be more of an issue, for example, in a group, than it might be one-to-one virtually. So there's obviously the difference between one-to-one working and group working. So those are some of the sort of core themes that come from a very quick scan of the existing literature. But now we're going to turn to our research, and Damian is going to take over.
So I'm going to share with you some of our findings. And what I want to share before is that we were asked to write this chapter last year, before COVID-19. So we did the research, and then after we collected all of the data, we said, okay, we need to ask again, because the world is a very different place. That when people answer, we closed the survey in January of this year for the first track. And then we did the second time. And interestingly, the information was not very different. I still think that some people who thought that virtual work would not work, or they were not willing or open to working virtually, and they had to, they didn't have any option, then I think changed their mind. I don't know if anybody had this experience here, that maybe before you were not working virtually and you start working virtually, and well, that works. It may not be the same, but still works. Like for me, I started thinking about that a few years ago when I developed my coaching supervision training. That at that time they were only in-person trainings, and I thought, okay, we can do that virtually and we can make it work. So in some way I was prepared, and most of my clients I work virtually in coaching and supervision. But I want to share with you some of the numbers so you get a sense of some of these findings, particularly around advantages and disadvantages of working virtually. So what we're going to do is I'm going to talk for a few minutes, and then we're going to go to small groups. So prepare to think about what we are talking, because in 10 minutes, we're going to go to small groups. This is what with Eve, we want to be sure that you have some time to think together and to discuss your experiences working virtually. So basically, in this research, we have two phases. The first one finished in January this year, and then we started the second round, asking people not the same, but similar questions, maybe shorter version. And unfortunately, there was not a lot of overlap between the two groups, so it was a little bit difficult to compare, because only 20% of the people who participated in the first one participated in the second one. But still, for the first group, for the original survey, we have 87 coaches participating and 121 supervisors. And as you can see here, most people had more than 5 years of experience. You know, in terms of coaches, we're very experienced, and in terms of supervisors, you see more like a normal curve.
Damian, were they able to respond to both?
Yeah, only 20%. Only 20% of the people, they still overlap. So it was difficult to compare because it was not the same people answering the two surveys.
But if you're asking whether people could answer both surveys as a coach and as a supervisee and as a supervisor, they could if they chose to. There was nothing that would stop them.
Okay, so that was the question. Thank you for clarifying that. So most people were in the UK and Europe, as you can see. And this is from the first group, and from the second group is a similar distribution. So unfortunately, we didn't get a lot of people from other places. In the future, when we do future surveys and research, we hope to have a more global representation. In part, it's also because the amount of supervisors doing this work worldwide. Now, when we ask about the preference to the first group, you can see that from the coaches, 23% and 35% of the supervisors prefer to work face-to-face. And the rest prefer to work virtually or didn't have a preference. So even though, and that was before, that was with the first group. So we thought that was an interesting information here, where there is a percentage of coaches and supervisors who would rather work in person than virtually. Now, when we compare the original survey and the follow-up in terms of what was the amount of work they were working virtually, for coaches and supervisors, if they were comparing where they were now and where they were projected to be in the future for the people who were working virtually, they said that 80% of the work was doing virtually, and in 5 years, it will increase from 80 to 82%. And for supervisors, if they were working 70% of the time virtually, they saw that they will go to 76. Now, if we compare with a group when after COVID-19, and we were asking how much of your work is being done virtually, for coaches is 97%, and for supervisors, 98%. So most of the work was done virtually. When we asked about the projection in 5 years, for coaches, it was 78%, and for supervisors, 81%. So at the end, the percentages about how we think different in 5 years was not very different. I don't know if you want to add anything to this, but it was not a meaningful difference.
No, I think that's right. Yeah.
So when we ask about advantages, and Eve already talked about that, so we compare what the literature said and what we found, and the things were similar. What literature talks about, what are the advantages and disadvantages of working virtually, what we found in the lit review and what we found in our survey were similar. The advantage, what it was saying about working with anybody, anywhere, geographically, the flexibility to the schedule, the time saved in travel, easy access if there are recordings of the sessions, an improved balance between work and home life as a result of not having to travel. This is what the existing literature review said. But when we find our own review, and by the way, we compare coaches and supervisors, and the things were very similar. There was no big difference between what coaches and supervisors were talking about advantages and disadvantages of working virtually. But the number one, repeated many times, is saving time and cost, saving time and money as the main resource, because no, the fact that people don't have to travel, they don't have to spend money in parking, in gas. So saving time and money, these were the main advantages of working virtually. The convenience of being comfortable working from home, the ability to work globally with people from all over the world, the flexibility that allows, and being also eco-friendly. The idea is that you are not wasting resources by working virtually. Now, the disadvantages or key challenges from literature were related about what Eve started talking about, missing some of the elements of body language and energy and the things that you experience in person that you don't experience virtually. And building trust and building relationships could have been what was an issue, basically. Technological issues, and also ethical and security issues around confidentiality, storage of recordings, and finally, holding attention, all of the interruptions that we have when we're working virtually. And the results from our research are pretty similar and not very different with the lit review that we have done. Number one is technology. Number one is definitely technology. Many people were talking about challenges, particularly in some countries where the internet is not very reliable. Like, for example, in my experience working in Latin America, in Venezuela, is one of the countries that you never know if the person will or will not be able to connect effectively. And so, and we're going to be talking about the strategies today too at the end of the session. What do you do? What do you do with that? And he was talking about working with another professional, preparation, planning for plan B. Like plan B is very important these days. When things don't work, what is the plan B? But technology was number one, and that was also related to lack of training. I don't know what is in your case, but for many people, like when you buy a new TV or something new at home, you may not read the guidelines about how to use it. Well, that happened a lot too with Zoom, getting new technology, but not spending time in getting familiar with the technology. I think that was one of the key challenges and disadvantages of working virtually, not knowing, not understanding how the software worked. And then the second one was building the relationship. That's what from Lit Review, the ability to build trust and connect is not the same for everyone. I think that for some people it's more challenging than others. Then the distractions and interruptions, having pets at home, having family members coming in and out. And the other thing that came up, particularly more from supervisors than from coaches, is the issue of creativity in supervision. In some way, not being able to do things you can do in person when you're working virtually, particularly around body work, somatics, and other techniques or strategies you may use in supervision that is more difficult to do when you work in person. But I do believe we can be creative. I have seen Michel Moral here presenting and doing great supervision session during our conference virtually. And he said, oh, this is the first time that I am doing that. So we can be creative and we can be exploratory and try new things. So let's go to small groups. And this is what we want to ask you to do. In 10 minutes, in small groups, we want to ask you about your experience. What have been your experience working virtually? For some people, you raised your hand before that you changed your mind in terms of what were your idea about working virtually and what really happened. And what are you doing? What are the strategies? So we can spend the rest of the session today talking about the strategies, what we can do to be more effective working virtually. So I'm going to stop sharing here. And I think, Lily, you will need to help us here to go to rooms. If we talk about groups of 4, this is what we agreed?
Sorry?
We agreed about working with groups of 4?
I think so, yes, yes.
So we have 38 participants. Do the math, please. Math is not my strength.
No, just
10
groups. You do 9
groups?
groups, because Damian and I
9 groups? Okay, 9 groups it is.
Damian and I won't be in a group, will we, Damian? Are you going to go into a group?
What do you want to do? You want to go to groups or do you want to stay here?
I don't mind. It's just, but 9 groups is probably right.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll put 9 and
Yeah, let's go to groups, Eve, so we can also hear what people have to say.
10 minutes, right? So
10
you'll
minutes.
get a little notice. You'll have to click accept into your group, and then you'll be brought back automatically. You'll have a 1-minute warning, and then it'll come back into this main room. All right,
Thank you,
enjoy.
Lily.
Thank you.
We will, from there, Eve and I are going to be sharing some of the tips that people share, because we ask people about advantages, disadvantages, challenges of working virtually, and tips, strategies. So we are going to share with you some of the strategies, but we want to hear you first. So any comment, reaction from your discussions and strategies that can be applied in these cases? Who would like to start?
I think I'm going to just contribute 2 really interesting ideas we were just talking about. And of course, others from my group, please also chime in, whatever struck you. One was using 2 cameras at a time, as Paul and I think Michelle did. I have to figure out the technology around that, both like you could, they were trying to explain like how, but whatever.
Lilia, just a second. Before you keep going, I want to ask everybody to turn off your microphones because we have a lot of noises in the background. So please, if everybody turn off the microphone, we are going to be able to hear you better. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, I hope I have, okay. So one was using multiple cameras to have different things in view, like if you're doing the Legos or a magic box or something like that on one and the other on the face, it's just a different way. And then Paul mentioned an exercise, which I wasn't present for, but maybe some of you were, where you actually used going out on the internet as part of, like, to go find a tree that represented something or other. I wasn't there. But I thought, wow, that's really interesting to not just use this as a second best for in person, but to actively take advantage of the technology in a more conscious way. I thought that was an interesting way to begin to think.
Thank you, Lily. And this second best came out during the research. A couple of people said this is not necessary. It can be a second best, but also how to change the paradigm to looking at working virtually as the first best, not the second best. But thank you for bringing this up, and the creativity, looking for different ways to do things that we may not consider yet. By seeing other people doing and by learning how other people are using creativity virtually, we can be open to new possibilities. I don't know if you want to add anything to this. Based on our research.
No, I'd like to hear from other groups. That'd be lovely.
Okay, great. Who wanna go next? Yes, Terry.
So a few things came up. One was the technology doesn't necessarily always work everywhere in the world, depending on the internet connectivity and availability. I also personally have found certain organizations block Zoom now. They don't allow you to install Zoom or use Zoom just due to, I think, some of the security issues that Zoom had right after COVID with Zoom bombing and other challenges. Some organizations have just shut it down completely. So that has been an issue for me personally. The other was not liking to turn on video to be able to move around and not have to sit in one spot for long periods of time. We also talked about, as people are doing more and more video, and I'm hearing this from my clients as well, is having physical issues, not being able to exercise or get up and move due to back-to-back meetings. I have some Silicon Valley clients that are back-to-back for 12 hours straight, don't even really have time to eat and that sort of thing. So that's been an interesting coaching challenge for them around how to manage that when their organization expects that now. So it's really video fatigue. So those were, I think, and then we also got off into talking about the impact of COVID that's having on the pricing of coaching. That the price per hour for coaching is being driven downward due to layoffs at many of the big coaching companies and reduced volume. The coaching companies are trying to save money by laying off coaches and also having less work for them. So I have had some of my contracts lowering the price of coaching per hour. That has happened for sure.
Thank you, Terry. And I was in that group, and we were trying to differentiate. Are people charging less because it's virtual? It's suppose virtual is less value than in person. So because of that, people are paying less, or is something else? And based on Terry's experience, it's not about because it's a virtual experience, but because of what's happening with the economy and what's happening with COVID-19 worldwide. Thank you, Terry, for bringing this up.
I'll just quickly share something that came up in our group that Sylviane brought up, is the level of intimacy that you can have with a Zoom call with the smaller groups. It can be much higher than it could be in a face-to-face. And with some of the deep coaching that I do, even if I take away the video and you just go to voice, again, you get more love. You can get a higher level intimacy. And it's just an interesting stripping away of the modalities and bringing it down to a single, like to your voice, can really make that powerful.
I agree with that, Kieran, but I think that there's something we haven't quite touched on yet. We may have touched on it, but one thing that emerged very strongly is just how important the contracting is. I mean, of course, we all know contracting is always important, but contracting really carefully when we're working virtually, including contracting about what will happen if we have a problem. What will we do if, this, I'm just saying where it's relevant, if someone walks through the door, if you're not in a safe environment, if someone comes into the room. So really knowing what you're going to do in different circumstances. So including interruptions with that. And then I think the other thing around technology, just for safeguarding, was making sure people had things like the latest versions of software. I mean, it seems obvious, doesn't it? But Zoom has actually done a lot of updates, and some people hadn't done them. And then there was a point at which people were just shut out of Zoom because they hadn't done the security updates. So having those latest versions, making sure the equipment is suitable for the work it needs to do, having a good quality camera, making sure the audio is okay, testing things out in advance. There were a number of things that came up that would just support the work that was being done.
I want to reinforce these two things, what Kieran talked about, the intimacy of working virtually, because many times there is this belief that you cannot accomplish that. And this is more in our minds than in really the possibility. So I want to invite everyone to consider here, what is your own belief about how intimate you can get working virtually? Because if you don't think you can accomplish that, maybe it's a self-fulfilled prophecy that you may not allow that to happen. I personally believe, this is my personal belief, that this is possible. And even during our coaching conference that we have this year, many of you were there, you know that you got a lot of intimacy just talking to your colleagues in small groups. You get a level of connection with each other that you may not have accomplished in past conferences that we organized when you met in person. So there is something that is possible. And what Eve said, I wanted to reinforce. If you can get one key thing from today is contracting, because this is what we found that most people said, that with all of these different ways of working and with all of these challenges, contracting is key. So how do you contract for interruptions? How do you contract if people need to cancel? How do you contract if internet is not working that day? Like I have a very good system, and living in Los Angeles in the United States, you may consider that you will not have problems with internet. And I did have, I remember in one of these meetings that Peter Hawkins was presenting and my internet went down. So that can happen to anybody, anywhere, doesn't matter where you live, and how prepared you are, and what is plan B. And that day, Lily was not there. So I wanted plan B for Lily. So we had to go to plan C. So you have to consider what is your plan A, plan B, plan C for different circumstances that may happen. So contracting and planning are key elements in working virtually. So for example, like talking about what is not appropriate, virtually many people don't know what is and what not. So I have seen people being in meetings from their beds, like laying in their bed, or in the treadmill at the same time, so you need to clarify in the contracting time what is and not appropriate during supervision or coaching or whatever activities you are doing. And you have to be careful, because I have also seen something working virtually that would not happen in person. It's somebody that was in a class and forgot and went to have a shower, and everybody got to see the person naked because she forgot that she had the video on. So these are some of the challenges also working virtually, you know. Just be careful if you decide to go to a shower, you're taking a class. So we need to start wrapping up. We can hear a couple of more people before we finish. Anybody else would like to share? Yes, Andrea and Mauricio. And
Mauricio and I were in the same group, so we might be saying
okay,
the
great.
same. Do you want to go, Mauricio? You're on mute. He's
We
on
were
mute.
talking about, Andrea and I were talking overbooking yourself because obviously the technology is there. And that the fact is that you can do it from Monday through Friday, sometimes Saturday, but when it stops. So obviously you need to have some boundaries to be able to do family balance in that sense. There is an article on APA on Zoom burnout, which is interesting. So obviously that gives you also a hint in terms of not necessarily doing all this work, but when Damian mentioned the fact that it's on our minds, the fact that to have to people in terms of having people in front of you in the reality or virtually, I tend to think we can do that, and we've done it. So that's to have that great rapport with your client.
Thank you, Mauricio. And I may ask you to share with us the AP article so we can share that with
I'll
everybody.
do that, surely. Let me look for, I mean, I have it, but let me look for it and I'll send it.
Great, thank you. Andrea?
And the other thing we talked about was the background setting. So we were talking about showing up in the presence and the difference between, I mean, to your point about not being in bed, but also like some people use green screen. Sometimes that's very nice and soothing, but also you kind of makes you wonder, like, what are they hiding? And we talked about the authenticity of, you know, having like being in your real space and then being in having a calming background as opposed to like a really cluttered, busy background. So we talked about that presence as well.
And I must share you a story. I was watching a video about health services. It was done on Zoom. And I joke not, but the person who is one of the lead presenters had a rack of wine behind them. And I think we always need to think, what's the image we're trying to project with our background?
So Eve, we need to start wrapping up. So anything else you would like to say before we finish today? Any other messages or anything else that we found? We are finishing the chapter, so it's going to be published, I don't know, by the end of the year, maybe?
Maybe, probably early next year. Which of course we may, well, I think we'll still be working virtually. And I think there are a couple of things. It was really interesting when I think, was it Terry, somebody was talking about how people aren't putting gaps between sessions. They're working as people who are just 12 hours back to back. And one of the things for me has been self-care, has been not to put things back to back, actually to always have time to move between sessions. But also not to feel constrained by sitting down. So doing more presencing exercises and finding doing more breathing exercises really helps people start of sessions, but also getting them to move around to do things. You know, there's no reason why you can't do the NLP perceptual positions with someone with a laptop moving around a room, going to different positions, talking about things. I think, again, it's sort of mindset, really anything is possible. But sometimes we just have to believe it's possible. But no, I wasn't going to say anything else, Damian.
Yeah, the last thing I want to say is about experimenting. Like many times we stay in what is comfortable for us, what we already know. So my invitation to everybody, as coaches and supervisors, is to be experimental. Try different things. Look, and we feel more sometimes we feel more confident just having a conversation. But if you want to take some risk and try different things using your body, even you're working virtually, or if you use Lego or drawing or other technique that you may think you cannot do it because it's not in person, I want to invite you. If you use, like, I found a way to use pictures, for example, like if you work with photos, like one way to show it, and we did that at the conference, is we show, instead of having at the table that you will have in person, you show the different pictures one at a time, and then you ask, okay, from all of the pictures, choose one. So there are ways to go around it. It's just the invitation is consider trying and experimenting with different techniques, because this issue of creativity came up from the supervisor perspective as one of the key challenges and concerns and disadvantages of working virtually. Any last word, Eve?
No, just thank everyone. Actually, some lovely things have emerged, and I hope if they appear in the chapter, you won't mind. But thank you very much. It's like some live research, but no, thank you very much. It's been really lovely to work with you today, and to meet so many old friends as well.
And here I just sharing the information in case that people probably know how to reach me, but here to reach you if want to be in communication or want to learn about your work. The Global Coaching Supervisors Network also is like a sister group to ours, and it's for people who are more experienced. What are the requirements to participate, Eve?
Everyone who's a member is a qualified supervisor, and they've got at least 50 hours of experience, but everything's free to attend, free to join, and has been since we started. So I think our next sessions are on appreciative inquiry in supervision, and that's on August the 6th and 7th.
Great. So with this, I think that Lily, we have to make some announcement before we go.
Always announcements. Yes, thank you. That was a great conversation. Breakout rooms to talk further on this. How does it affect us, our clients? Very great. All right, so our next session is on August the 17th, 8 a.m. Pacific time, on how to navigate the lockdown with peace and stability as supervisors. And that's Samia Clouche, she's not here today, from France. And then September 14th, Tom is going to present the EMCC Supervisor competencies. And then I think October it will be Marilyn O'Hearn on cultural competencies in coaching supervision. And more information on the website, so please access that. And two big announcements. We're starting our roster for next year. So think about if you have a topic related to supervision that you'd like to present. Call out will go out in the next couple of months. And then we're also, the America's Coaching Supervision Network is sponsoring a book in the next little while. And Francine Campion is leading that. So if you're interested, reach out to her. She's the lead editor for that. I think that's everything. Damian, did I miss anything?
No, we're very excited about having a book with all of your contributions. And the book is going to be research-based. So this is for people who are interested in research, people who are interested in going, serving, learning more to grow supervision. And the book is focused on the Americas. So we want to have our first book on coaching supervision from the Americas with the perspective of America's supervisors. Now, there were not any, Lily, when we went to our training a few years ago, but now we have a lot of supervisors in the Americas, and you have a lot to contribute. So we want to be sure that there is a voice from America's supervisors. So this is going to be the focus of the book.
Yeah, and sorry, I just wanted to add that there are some supervisors in this network that are not from the Americas. And so in order to be inclusive, invite yourself into working with somebody from the Americas if you want to get in on this book. So I think about a third of our people are, build a team, make it happen. Be creative. There you go.
Yeah, the idea is to form teams with people and as a team to research one of the topics that we're going to be proposing with Francine.
Yeah, there will be a list that comes out.
A couple of more announcements is for people interested from Asia, people from India who are here or who are living in an area, a time that you can participate. The Asian Coaching Supervisors Networks are always the last Wednesday of the month in Asia and Tuesday night in the United States in the Pacific Standard Time, 8 p.m. And we're going to start sharing the information also in the announcement so you can see when you receive the invitation. Now, if for any reason you are not in our roster and you have not received an invitation for today's session, please write your email in the chat room now so we can collect that information and include your name in our roster. So if by any chance you did not receive the invitation for today, please write down in the chat room your email so we can include you for next month.
And you can also sign up on the website directly. There is a place to add your name.
And a couple of things about our website. Many people are not familiar with what we have in our website, but we have all of the recordings from the last 3 years of the America's Coaching Supervisors Network. There are great presentations, even from Eve, who is here today, from Peter Hawkins, from a lot of very experienced supervisors that over the years participated in our sessions. So take advantage of this great resource. They're all, now we revamped our website, so we have all of the videos available. Also, we have a directory where some of you are already there, and that's a place where people can find supervisors. So if you're interested in being part of that roster, please, directory, let us know. And thank you for being here today. And Eve, thank you for doing this today with me.
It's a pleasure.
It was great working together.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. Nice to meet everyone. Thank you so much.
And thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon.
See you next month.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.